Caleb Morrison's hand trembled as he dropped $2 onto the auction block. Every cent he had left in this world. The crowd laughed. The auctioneer smirked. But Caleb's eyes stayed fixed on the woman standing alone on that platform. The woman no one else would bid on. The woman they called worthless. He didn't know her name yet, didn't know her story. But something in her eyes, that defiant spark refusing to die, reminded him of everything he'd lost. And everything he still hoped to find. Subscribe to our channel and follow this story to the end. Comment your city below. Let us know how far this tale has traveled. The summer sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty streets of Miller's Crossing, Montana Territory, 1873. Caleb Morrison stood at the edge of the crowd, his worn boots planted in the dirt, watching something that made his stomach turn. "Next up, gentlemen," the auctioneer's voice cut through the murmur of the crowd. "Our final bride of the day, Miss Clara Whitmore, 26 years of age, formerly a schoolteacher from Philadelphia." Caleb watched the young woman step forward onto the wooden platform. She wore a plain gray dress, faded from travel and washing. Her copper-red hair was pulled back severely, but strands had escaped, framing a face smudged with exhaustion. She clutched a small carpet bag, like it contained everything she owned in the world. It probably did. "She can read and write," the auctioneer continued, his enthusiasm already waning. "Knows her numbers. Good with children, supposedly." A man near Caleb snickered. "What's wrong with her? Why's she last?" "Look at them freckles," another answered. "And that red hair. Bad luck, that is." Caleb's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. The auctioneer cleared his throat. "Starting bid is $50. Do I hear 50? Silence. Clara Whitmore stood perfectly still on that platform, her chin lifted slightly. Her green eyes stared straight ahead at nothing. $40 then? Surely someone will bid 40 for an educated woman. More silence. Someone coughed. Caleb recognized two men pushing toward the front of the crowd. His blood ran cold. Silas Garrett's men, the ones who ran the saloon at the edge of town. The one with rooms upstairs where women worked whether they wanted to or not. $30? Come now, gentlemen, this is a bargain. One of Garrett's men raised his hand lazily. $5. The auctioneer's face reddened. Sir, the minimum. $5, the man repeated. Take it, or leave her standing there till dark. Clara's composure cracked for just a moment. Her hands tightened on her carpetbag. She knew. She understood exactly what that bid meant. The auctioneer looked around desperately. Anyone else? Anyone at all? Laughter rippled through the crowd. Guess nobody wants damaged goods, someone called out. Should have stayed where she came from. $5 for a woman like that is generous, I'd say. Caleb's hand went to his pocket. He felt the $2 silver there, the only money left after he'd paid for medicine to save his last healthy cow. $2. It was supposed to buy flour and salt for the month. It was supposed to keep him alive through summer. Clara's eyes moved across the crowd for the first time. Not begging, not crying, just looking at them all with something that might have been contempt, might have been despair. And then her gaze found Caleb. For one heartbeat, their eyes locked. He saw it then, that spark, that refusal to break even when everything was trying to break her. He'd seen that same look in his sister Lucy's eyes before the fever took her. That same stubborn light that said she would not go quietly. Going once to the gentleman for $5, the auctioneer called. Caleb stepped forward. Going twice, $2. The crowd turned. The auctioneer squinted at him. I'm sorry, did you say? $2. Caleb pulled the coins from his pocket and held them up. That's my bid. Laughter exploded around him. Morrison's lost his mind. $2? That ain't even a bid. Boy can't afford a wife, can barely afford to feed himself. The auctioneer shook his head. Sir, I already have a bid of 5. Then let him have her. Caleb met the auctioneer's eyes steadily. But if he don't want to pay 5, and I'm offering 2, seems to me I'm the only real bid you've got. Garrett's man stepped forward, his face twisted with anger. Now wait just a minute. You want her for 5? Caleb asked quietly. Then pay 5. The man hesitated. He looked back toward the saloon, calculating. $5 was real money. Money his boss would expect him to account for. Well, the auctioneer looked between them. Garrett's man spat on the ground. Keep her, ain't worth the trouble. He turned and pushed back through the crowd. The auctioneer stared at Caleb's $2 silver. This is highly irregular, Mr. Morrison. You got another bid coming? Silence. Then I reckon it's regular enough. Caleb stepped up to the platform and set the coins down with a soft clink that somehow silenced every whisper. The auctioneer swept up the money with a resigned sigh. Sold to Caleb Morrison for $2. He thrust a sheaf of papers at Caleb. She's your problem now. Clara watched the man approach her heart hammering against her ribs. Tall, lean, a face weathered by sun and hardship, with gray eyes that held something she couldn't quite read. Not cruelty, not lust. Something else. Miss Whitmore. He tipped his hat, a gesture of respect she hadn't expected. I'm Caleb Morrison. I've got a ranch about 10 miles out. She found her voice somehow. Mr. Morrison. I should tell you straight. He kept his voice low, meant only for her. I ain't looking for a wife in the way most men mean. What I need is help. Someone to cook, keep house, tend the garden. The ranch is struggling. I'm struggling. I can offer you shelter and food, but not much else right now. Clara studied his face for any sign of deception. She'd learned to look for it. Learned the hard way in Philadelphia what happened when you trusted the wrong man. Why? She asked quietly. Why did you bid? Caleb's jaw worked for a moment, because those men were going to take you somewhere no woman should have to go. Because this whole thing ain't right, selling people like horses, and because... He stopped, something passing across his features. Because someone should have done something, and nobody else was going to. Clara felt tears threatening and forced them back. She would not cry. Not here. Not in front of these people who had laughed at her. I accept your terms, Mr. Morrison. He nodded once. Then let's get your papers sorted and leave this place. The marriage broker was a greasy man with tobacco-stained fingers who looked at Caleb with open contempt. $2, he muttered, shuffling through Clara's contract. Bossel's going to have my hide. She was supposed to fetch 50 at least. She fetched what the market would bear, Caleb replied flatly. You're lucky anyone bid at all after you let Garrett's men start things off. The broker's eyes narrowed. Now see here, Morrison. We're done here. Caleb took the papers and Clara's hand without thinking. He felt her stiffen at the contact, then relax slightly. Let's go, ma'am. They walked together through the dispersing crowd. Clara felt eyes on her back, heard the whispers following them. $2. Imagine. Morrison's always been touched in the head. She'll run off first chance she gets. Mark my words. Why would she run? From that ranch? To what? Caleb's wagon waited at the edge of town, loaded with the supplies he'd come for, minus the flour and salt he could no longer afford. A single horse stood in the traces, a sturdy bay mare past her prime, but still reliable. This is Bessie, Caleb said, helping Clara up onto the wagon seat. She ain't fast, but she's steady. Clara settled onto the worn wooden seat, her carpet bag clutched in her lap. Caleb climbed up beside her and took the reins. "It's a couple hours to the ranch," he said as they began to move. "We should make it before dark." "Mr. Morrison," "Caleb," he corrected gently. "If we're going to be living under the same roof, might as well use given names." Clara hesitated. "Caleb, then. You should know that I am not experienced in certain matters, but I am a hard worker. I can cook well enough. I kept my father's house for years after my mother passed, and I'm educated. I can help with accounts, correspondence, anything that requires reading or writing." Caleb glanced at her. "You were a schoolteacher," the man said. "Yes, in Philadelphia." "What brought you out here?" Clara's hands tightened on her bag. The question she'd been dreading. "Circumstances changed. I found myself without employment or prospects. The advertisement for mail-order brides seemed—" She couldn't finish. "Seemed like the only door left open," Caleb supplied quietly. Clara looked at him, surprised by the understanding in his voice. "Yes, exactly that." They rode in silence for a while. The town fell away behind them, replaced by endless grassland dotted with wildflowers, mountains rising in the distance. Despite everything, Clara felt something in her chest loosen slightly. Space. Air. Room to breathe after months of feeling suffocated. "That man at the auction," she said finally. "The one who bid $5. Who is he?" Caleb's expression darkened. "Works for Silas Garrett. Garrett owns the biggest ranch in these parts, plus the saloon and a few other businesses. He's got influence with the sheriff, the mayor, most of the town council. And the saloon has rooms upstairs." "Yes, ma'am, it does." Clara absorbed this. "You made an enemy today, then." "Garrett's been wanting my land for 2 years now. We were enemies already." Caleb shook his head. "Don't worry about him. He's a bully, but he's careful. Doesn't like to get his hands dirty in ways that might come back on him." Clara wasn't reassured, but she said nothing. She dealt with powerful men who wanted things they shouldn't have. She knew how dangerous they could be. They crested a hill, and Caleb pulled the wagon to a stop. "There it is," he said simply. Clara looked down at the small ranch spread out below them. A cabin, really not much more than a shack with a stone chimney. A barn that leaned slightly to one side. A corral with a few horses. Cattle dotting the surrounding grassland, fewer than there should be for a working ranch. It was, without question, the most modest homestead Clara had ever seen. It was also, somehow, beautiful. Wildflowers carpeted the meadow around the buildings. A creek glittered in the late afternoon sun. The mountains rose behind it all, purple and majestic in the distance. "I told you it ain't much," Caleb said, watching her face. "How much land?" 160 acres. Homesteaded it 5 years ago." He paused. "My sister and I came out together. She passed last winter." Clara heard the grief beneath the flat words. "I'm sorry." Caleb nodded once, sharply. "Lucy would have liked you, I think." She had that same stubborn look. Before Clara could respond, he clicked to Bessie and the wagon lurched forward down the hill. The cabin was rough, but surprisingly clean. One main room with a stone fireplace, a hand-built table with 2 chairs, a small kitchen area with iron pots and a worn cookstove. Through one door, Clara glimpsed a simple bedroom with a rope bed and a chest of drawers. "You'll take the bedroom," Caleb said, setting her carpet bag down. "I'll sleep out here by the fire." "I can't take your bed." It was Lucy's bed. The words came out harsher than he intended. He softened his voice. "I haven't slept in there since she passed. Can't bring myself to. You'd be doing me a kindness." Clara understood. Grief had its own geography. There were places you couldn't go without bleeding. "Thank you," she said simply. Caleb nodded toward the kitchen area. "Supplies are low. I couldn't buy everything I planned after—" He didn't finish. "But there's flour and beans and some salt pork. Creek's got fish if you can catch them. Garden out back has some vegetables coming up, though it's been neglected."
"I'll manage." Clara moved toward the kitchen, already assessing what she had to work with. "Is there a well?"
"No, water comes from the creek, about 50 yards down the slope. I'll show you in the morning." Caleb hesitated at the door. "I rise before dawn, work till dark most days this time of year. The cattle need tending, fences need mending, 100 other things need doing. You won't see much of me." "I'll have supper ready when you come in." Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, perhaps, or gratitude. That would be welcome, ma'am. Thank you."
"Clara," she corrected. "You said we should use given names."
A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Clara, then. Good night."
"Good night, Caleb."
She waited until she heard him settle in the main room, heard his breathing deepen into sleep. Only then, alone in the small bedroom that still held traces of another woman's presence, a dried flower pressed in a book, a ribbon hanging from a nail, a faded photograph on the dresser of a young woman with Caleb's gray eyes, did Clara allow herself to feel. The tears came silently, for everything she'd lost, for everything she'd endured, for the strange turn of fate that had brought her to this place, purchased by a stranger for $2 silver, uncertain what tomorrow would bring. But beneath the fear and the grief, something else stirred. That man, Caleb Morrison, had stepped forward when no one else would, had paid his last cent to spare her a fate worse than this rough cabin, had spoken to her with respect, offered her protection without demanding anything in return. Maybe, just maybe, she had finally found a place where she could stop running. Or maybe this was just another trap, prettier than the last one. Clara wiped her eyes and unpacked her carpet bag with methodical movements. 3 dresses, all worn. A hairbrush that had belonged to her mother. 2 books she couldn't bear to part with. A small leather pouch containing her father's pocket watch. The only thing of value she had left. She set the watch on the dresser beside the photograph of Caleb's sister. 2 lives lost. 2 people left behind to carry the weight. She lay down on the narrow bed, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the Montana night. Wind in the grass, distant cattle, the creek murmuring over stones. So different from Philadelphia, so far from everything she'd known. Tomorrow, she would begin the work of surviving, of making herself useful, valuable, indispensable, of earning her place, and maybe, if she was very lucky, of finding something she'd stopped believing existed. Hope. Caleb lay awake by the dying fire, staring at the ceiling. He could hear nothing from the bedroom, but he imagined her in there, probably terrified, probably wondering what kind of fool she'd ended up with. $2. He'd spent his last $2 on a stranger. But she wasn't just a stranger, was she? She was someone who'd been thrown away, discarded, deemed worthless by a crowd too blind to see what was standing right in front of them. He'd seen it, though, in that one moment when their eyes met. He'd seen strength and intelligence and something unbroken despite everything trying to break it. Lucy would have called it fate. Lucy had believed in things like that. Caleb didn't know what he believed anymore. But he knew this. Come morning, he'd have to make this work somehow. He'd have to find a way to keep the ranch going, keep both of them fed, keep Garrett at bay, and figure out what it meant to share his life with someone after a year of being alone. $2, everything he had. He closed his eyes and let exhaustion take him. Whatever came next, he'd face it in the morning. Silas Garrett stood at the window of his study, looking out at the moonlit landscape. Behind him, the man he'd sent to the auction shifted nervously. "You let Morrison outbid you," Garrett said calmly. "For a woman I told you to acquire." "He only had $2, boss. I figured—" "You figured wrong." Garrett turned slowly. He was a tall man, still powerful despite his 50 years, with cold blue eyes and silver threading through his dark hair. "That woman is a schoolteacher from the East, educated, refined, exactly what a respectable ranch needs to look legitimate." "Morrison's ranch ain't exactly respectable. It's falling apart." "For now." Garrett moved to his desk, poured himself a whiskey. "Morrison's sitting on the best water source in 20 miles. That creek runs year-round, even in drought. I need that water. I need that land." "So we take it. Same way we took the Hendricks place, the Abernathy spread." "Morrison's different. He won't scare easy. He's got nothing to lose." Garrett sipped his drink thoughtfully. But now he's got something to protect. Someone to protect. Understanding dawned in the other man's eyes. "His own nobility will be his undoing," Garrett continued. "A man who would spend his last $2 to save a woman from a life of degradation. That man will do anything to keep her safe." "What do you want me to do?" Garrett smiled, and there was no warmth in it. "Nothing yet. Let them settle in. Let Morrison start to believe things might work out. Let him get attached." He set down his glass with a soft click. "Then we'll remind him how fragile hope can be." The first week passed in careful silence. Clara rose before dawn each morning, her body remembering the rhythms of her father's farm. She cooked, she cleaned, she scrubbed floors that hadn't been touched in months. She mended clothes Caleb had thrown in corners, waiting for someday. Caleb left early and returned late, covered in dust and sweat and something that looked like defeat. He ate whatever she put in front of him without complaint, offered quiet thanks, and fell asleep by the fire before she could say goodnight. They barely spoke, but Clara watched him. She watched how he moved, careful, deliberate, like a man conserving every ounce of energy for survival. She watched how his eyes went to Lucy's photograph on the mantel each morning, lingered there for just a moment, then looked away. She watched how his hands shook sometimes when he thought no one could see. On the 8th day, Clara made her decision. "I want to come with you today." Caleb looked up from his coffee, startled. She stood before him wearing men's trousers she'd altered from a pair she'd found in the barn, one of his old shirts rolled at the sleeves. "Miss Clara, she corrected firmly. "And I'm not asking permission. I'm telling you I'm coming." Something flickered in his gray eyes. Surprise. Maybe respect. "Ranching ain't women's work?" She raised an eyebrow. "Neither is starving because a ranch fails. You said yourself you needed help. Here I am." Caleb studied her for a long moment. The stubborn set of her jaw, the practical way she'd dressed, the intelligence in those green eyes that said she'd already calculated exactly what she was getting into. "Can you ride?" "Not Western style, but I can learn." He almost smiled. "Got an old mare named Maple. She's gentle, forgiving of mistakes." "Then Maple and I will get along fine." They rode out together as the sun cleared the mountains. Caleb kept watching her from the corner of his eye, expecting complaints about the heat, the dust, the endless grasslands stretching in every direction. Clara said nothing. She simply rode. By midday, she'd spotted a heifer hiding in a thicket that Caleb had missed entirely. "There," she pointed. "Something's wrong with her." Caleb dismounted, pushed through the brush. The heifer lay on her side, belly distended, breathing in labored gasps. "Bloat," Clara said, sliding down from Maple. "My father's cattle got it sometimes when they found the clover patch." Caleb stared at her. "You know what this is?" "I know how to fix it, too. Do you have a knife?" They worked together for the next hour, Clara's hands steady as she guided Caleb through the treatment her father had taught her years ago. When the heifer finally struggled to her feet, shaky but alive, Caleb looked at Clara like he was seeing her for the first time. "Where does schoolteacher learn to do that?" Clara wiped her hands on her trousers. "My father believed women should know everything men know. Said the world was too dangerous for ignorance. Smart man." "He was." Her voice softened. "He died 2 years ago. Left me alone." Caleb nodded slowly. He understood alone. He understood it better than most. "I'm sorry." "So am I." Clara met his eyes. "But being sorry doesn't change anything, does it? Only doing something changes things." That evening, they sat on the porch as the sun went down, too tired to move but not quite ready to go inside. Caleb found himself telling Clara about the ranch, about his plans before everything went wrong, about the dreams he and Lucy had shared. Clara listened without interrupting. When he finished, she asked a question that surprised him. "How many cattle can this land actually support?" "Maybe 200 head, if everything goes right." "You have 27. 28 now, thanks to you." Clara was quiet for a moment, calculating. "If we can get through this summer, build the herd slowly, focus on breeding stock rather than selling—" "We?" Caleb raised an eyebrow. Clara flushed slightly. "I didn't mean—" "No," he shook his head. "No, I like it. We." He tested the word again. Been a long time since anything was we. Their eyes met in the fading light. Something passed between them. Not romance, not yet, but something equally important. Partnership. The first fragile threads of trust. Clara looked away first. "We should get some rest. Tomorrow we check the south pasture?" Tomorrow we check the south pasture. She stood and went inside, and Caleb sat alone in the darkness, thinking about how strange it was that a woman he'd known barely a week had already started to change the shape of his thoughts. The second week brought the town. "I need supplies," Caleb said over breakfast. "And you should come. Meet people. See what's available." Clara hesitated. The memory of the auction still burned. "I'm not sure that's wise." "You can't hide forever, and folks need to see you're not what they think. They need to see you with their own eyes." She wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. She couldn't build a life here by hiding from it. Miller's Crossing looked different in daylight, without the crowd and the auction block and the weight of humiliation pressing down on her. Smaller, dustier, more ordinary. But the whispers started the moment they stepped into the general store. "That's her, isn't it? The $2 bride? Look at her, acting like she's respectable. Morrison must be desperate to bring her around decent folks." Clara kept her chin high and her eyes forward. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her wounded. The shopkeeper, a thin man with nervous eyes, barely looked at her as he filled Caleb's order. But a woman emerged from the back room, round-faced, gray-haired, with eyes that crinkled at the corners when she smiled. "You must be Mrs. Morrison." She extended her hand warmly. "I'm Martha Holloway. My husband runs the store, but I run him." Clara blinked, surprised by the genuine welcome. Yes, Clara. Clara Whitmore. I mean, Morrison." She stumbled over the name she hadn't yet grown accustomed to. Martha's smile widened. "New names take time to fit, don't they? Like new shoes. Come, let me show you the fabric we just got in. A woman needs something pretty now and then, even out here." While Martha led Clara toward the bolts of cloth, Caleb watched from the counter. He'd known Martha for years. She'd been one of Lucy's few friends in town, had sat with her during those final, terrible days. "She seems like a good woman," Martha said quietly to Clara, but loud enough for the hovering gossips to hear. "Anyone with eyes can see she's quality." Mrs. Holloway, Martha, and I mean it. I don't care what those hens are clucking about. I see how Caleb looks at you. That man hasn't had hope in his eyes since Lucy passed. You brought that back." She squeezed Clara's hand. "That's worth more than any $2. Clara felt tears threatening and blinked them back furiously. "Thank you," she whispered. "Now," Martha's tone turned brisk. "The Ladies' Aid Society meets every other Tuesday at my house. You'll come. No arguments. These women need to see you, talk to you, realize you're not whatever nonsense they've imagined." "I don't know if that's a good idea." "It's a terrible idea if you're hoping for peace and quiet," Martha grinned. "But it's the only way to change minds. Trust me." They were loading the wagon when a shadow fell across Caleb's path. Silas Garrett stood in the street, blocking their way. He was well-dressed, too well-dressed for a working rancher, with a silver watch chain glinting at his vest and boots that had never seen a day's real labor. "Morrison!" His voice was pleasant, too pleasant. "Heard you got yourself a wife." Caleb's hand moved instinctively toward his belt, where his revolver would have been if he'd worn it to town. Garrett. "No need for hostility, just being neighborly." Garrett's cold blue eyes moved to Clara, traveled slowly down her body, and back up in a way that made her skin crawl. "Mrs. Morrison, a pleasure to finally meet you properly." Clara said nothing. She didn't trust her voice not to shake. "Heard you were a schoolteacher back east." Garrett smiled, showing too many teeth. "Educated woman like you must find Morrison's little operation rather limiting." "I find it peaceful," Clara replied evenly. "A welcome change from certain environments." Something flickered in Garrett's eyes. Interest. Challenge. "Is that so? Well, if you ever find yourself wanting more stimulating company, my ranch is always open. We have books, music, conversation." Caleb stepped between them. "The lady's not interested." "Let the lady speak for herself." "She did. You just don't like the answer." Caleb's voice was quiet, but there was steel in it. "Now move aside. We've got work to do." For a long moment, the two men faced each other. The street had gone silent. People watched from doorways, from windows, holding their breath. Then Garrett laughed, a cold sound, like ice cracking. "Of course. My apologies for the intrusion." He tipped his hat mockingly to Clara. "Mrs. Morrison, until we meet again." He stepped aside, and Caleb helped Clara onto the wagon with hands that trembled slightly with suppressed anger. Neither of them spoke until they were well outside of town. "That man," Clara finally said. "He's dangerous." "Yes." "He wants something from you." "My land, my water." Caleb's jaw was tight. "He's been buying up every ranch around here for years. Mine's the last holdout." Clara looked at him. "And now?" "Now he wants you too. I saw the way he looked at you." Clara shuddered. "He reminded me of someone. Someone from before." Caleb glanced at her sharply. "The man who ruined your reputation?" She nodded, unable to speak for a moment. "Different face, same eyes." The eyes of a man who takes what he wants and destroys anyone who says no. Caleb's hand found hers on the wagon seat. A brief touch, there and gone. "He won't touch you," he said quietly. "I swear it." Clara wanted to believe him, but she'd believed promises before. That night, after supper, Clara told Caleb the truth. Not all of it, not yet, but enough. "The headmaster of the school where I taught," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "He was a respected man, wealthy, well-connected. Everyone admired him." Caleb sat across from her, his coffee forgotten in his hands. "He started paying attention to me. At first I thought he was being kind, mentoring me." She laughed bitterly. "I was naive. I actually believed he saw my potential as a teacher." "What happened?" Clara's hands twisted in her lap. He cornered me one night in his office, made his intentions clear. When I refused him, she had to stop, breathe. When I pushed him away, he was furious.
No one refused him. No one. Caleb's knuckles were white around his cup. The next day, he called a staff meeting, announced that I had stolen money from the school fund, showed forged evidence, said he'd discovered it during a routine audit. Clara's voice cracked. No one believed me when I denied it. Why would they? He was the headmaster. I was nobody. Clara, I wasn't arrested. He made sure of that. He didn't want a trial, didn't want me to have any chance to speak publicly. He just wanted me gone, ruined, unable to work anywhere in Philadelphia ever again. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, angry at the tears she couldn't control. The advertisement for mail-order brides came at my lowest moment. I thought anything had to be better than waiting to starve, or worse. Caleb set down his cup and moved to kneel beside her chair. His hand covered hers, rough and warm. You didn't do anything wrong. I know that. She looked at him, tears streaming now. But knowing it doesn't change what happened. Doesn't change what people believe. Doesn't erase the way they look at me. It changes how I look at you. His voice was fierce. You survived something that would have broken most people. You're still standing, still fighting. That's not weakness, Clara. That's strength. She searched his face for any sign of doubt, of judgment, of the calculating assessment she'd learned to expect from men. She found none. Why do you believe me? Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Because I've been judged for things I didn't do. Because I know what it's like to have no one in your corner. And because... He hesitated. Because everything about you tells me you're telling the truth. The way you work, the way you carry yourself, the way you flinch when certain things get mentioned. His thumb traced a gentle circle on the back of her hand. A man learns to read people living out here. You learn who's dangerous and who's just surviving. You're surviving, Clara, same as me. She didn't know who moved first. But suddenly she was in his arms, sobbing against his chest, while he held her awkwardly, unpracticed at comfort, but trying anyway. You're safe here, he murmured into her hair. Whatever else happens, you're safe with me. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Clara allowed herself to believe it. The routine of their days began to shift after that night. Caleb still worked dawn to dark, but now Clara rode out with him most mornings. She learned the land, every hill, every stream, every grazing spot the cattle favored. She learned which fences needed mending first, which water holes dried up in summer heat, where the predators liked to hunt. And Caleb began to see her, really see her. The way she talked to the animals, gentle but firm. The way she noticed things he missed. A loose board in the barn, a section of fence starting to rot. The early signs of illness in a calf. The way she planned ahead, always thinking 3 steps beyond the immediate crisis. You've got a mind for this, he told her one afternoon as they rode back toward the cabin. For ranching? For everything. He shook his head slowly. How did that school let you go? They must have been blind. Clara smiled sadly. They saw what they wanted to see. A poor girl with no connections. Easy to blame, easy to forget. Their loss. Your gain. The words slipped out before she could stop them, and she felt heat rise to her cheeks. But Caleb just nodded, something warm flickering in his gray eyes. Yes, it is. The 3rd week brought the first attack. Caleb found it at dawn. The fence on the north pasture cut clean through in 3 places. 4 cattle had wandered off during the night.
He spent the entire day tracking them down, and by the time he got home, his mood was black as thunder. "This wasn't an accident," he said, throwing his hat down. "Someone cut that wire deliberately." Clara set a plate in front of him. "Garrett? Has to be. No one else wants me gone that badly." He ran his hands through his hair. "I don't have the money to keep replacing wire. Don't have the time to patrol every inch of fence line." "Then we don't replace it the same way." Clara sat across from him. "We set a watch, take turns at night, and we document everything. Dates, locations, what was damaged. If it happens again, we'll have evidence." Caleb stared at her. "You want to fight this?" "I want to survive this. There's a difference." Her eyes were hard now, determined. "Men like Garrett count on their victims giving up, rolling over, making it easy. I've spent my whole life being easy to push around, Caleb. I'm done with that." Something shifted in the way he looked at her then. Something deeper than respect, warmer than partnership. "All right," he said quietly. "We fight." The pattern continued through the following weeks. Fence cut, water trough poisoned, a shed set on fire, small enough to seem accidental, large enough to send a message. Each time, Caleb and Clara rebuilt. Each time, they documented. Each time, they grew more watchful, more wary, more united against the invisible enemy picking at the edges of their lives. And each time, they grew closer. It happened in small moments. A brush of hands passing tools. A shared joke that made Clara laugh, really laugh, for the first time since she'd arrived. Long conversations by the fire while they took turns keeping watch. Caleb told her about the war, about the friend he'd watched die at Gettysburg, bleeding out in his arms while he couldn't do anything to stop it. About coming home to find his mother buried and his father drunk and violent. About grabbing Lucy and running west with nothing but the clothes on their backs. Clara told him about the years after her mother died, raising herself while her father worked himself into an early grave. About the scholarship that had seemed like salvation. About the slow realization that education couldn't protect you from powerful men who saw you as prey. They learned each other's scars, and in learning them, they began to heal. One night, as July burned toward August, Clara woke to find Caleb's bedroll empty. She found him on the porch, sitting in the darkness, Lucy's photograph clutched in his hands. "Couldn't sleep," he said without turning around. Clara sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "Want to talk about it?" "It's her birthday." His voice cracked slightly. "She would have been 23. Clara said nothing, just leaned into him, offering presence instead of words. "I keep thinking I should have done something different. Gotten a doctor sooner. Moved her to town where there was better care. Something." He pressed the heel of his hand to his eyes. "She was all I had, Clara, and I couldn't save her. You stayed with her. You held her hand. You made sure she wasn't alone." Clara's voice was gentle but firm. "That's not nothing, Caleb. That's everything." "It wasn't enough." "It's never enough. That's what love means, wanting to give more than you're able." She took his hand, laced her fingers through his. "But Lucy knew you loved her. She knew you would have given anything. That's what she took with her when she went." Caleb turned to look at her, his eyes red-rimmed and raw. "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "Find the right words. Always find the right words." Clara smiled sadly. "I was a teacher. Words were all I had." He lifted their joined hands, pressed his lips to her knuckles. The gesture was simple, almost unconscious, but it sent electricity through Clara's entire body. "Thank you," he whispered, "for being here, for staying. There's nowhere else I want to be." And she meant it. God help her, she meant it. The message came on a Sunday, delivered by a nervous-looking boy who wouldn't meet Clara's eyes. She read it twice, then walked out to where Caleb was working in the barn. "It's from Silas Garrett," she handed him the paper. "He's invited us to dinner, Friday evening." Caleb scanned the note, his expression darkening with every line. A gesture of neighborly goodwill, an opportunity to discuss matters of mutual interest. "I do hope Mrs. Morrison will attend." He crumpled the paper in his fist. "He's got nerve, I'll give him that." "What do we do?" "We don't go. That's what we do." "And then what?" Clara took the crumpled note, smoothed it out. "He keeps attacking our ranch in ways we can't prove? Keeps wearing us down until we have nothing left? You want to walk into his house? After everything?" "I want to look him in the eye." Clara's voice was steady, but her hands shook slightly. "I want him to know that we're not afraid, that we're not going anywhere." Caleb studied her face for a long moment. The determination there, the fear she was trying to hide, the courage it took to suggest facing the man who reminded her of her worst nightmare. "You're sure about this?" "No." She managed a small smile. "But I'm sure that hiding hasn't worked. Maybe it's time to try something else." Friday came too quickly. Clara wore her best dress, the blue calico she'd been saving, and tried to ignore the way her stomach churned as Garrett's ranch house came into view. It was everything their cabin wasn't. Sprawling, immaculate, a testament to wealth and power and the things money could buy. Silas Garrett met them at the door personally, all smiles and southern charm. "Morrison, and the lovely Mrs. Morrison. How delightful that you could join us." The dinner was torture. Garrett played the perfect host, solicitous and polite, while his cold eyes tracked Clara's every movement. His son, a young man of about 20, with his father's features and none of his self-control, stared at her openly, hungrily. "You must find our little community quite provincial after Philadelphia," Garrett remarked over the main course. "I find it refreshing," Clara replied evenly. "People here say what they mean." "Do they?" Garrett's smile didn't waver. "And what do you think they mean when they whisper about the $2 bride?" Caleb's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. "I think they mean that my husband saw value where others were too blind to look." Clara met Garrett's gaze steadily. "I think they mean that price and worth are not the same thing." Something flickered in Garrett's eyes, surprise perhaps, at being challenged in his own dining room. "Well said, Mrs. Morrison. Well said indeed." After dinner, Garrett led them to his study for drinks. Clara noticed immediately that his son positioned himself between her and the door. "I'll come straight to the point," Garrett said, pouring whiskey for Caleb and himself. "I want your land, Morrison. I'm prepared to pay you 3 times what it's worth. It's not for sale. Everything's for sale. It's simply a matter of finding the right price." Garrett's eyes slid to Clara. "Or the right leverage." Caleb stood so fast his chair crashed backward. "What did you just say?" "Calm yourself." Garrett didn't flinch. "I'm merely observing that a man with a wife has more to consider than a man alone. Responsibilities, vulnerabilities. Are you threatening her?" "I'm offering you a fortune. Take the money, take your bride, start fresh somewhere else. Everyone wins. Everyone except us." Clara's voice cut through the tension. "Because we'd know we were chased off our land by a bully who couldn't accept the word no." Garrett turned to her, something dangerous flickering behind his pleasant mask. "You have spirit, Mrs. Morrison. I admire that. But spirit can be broken. Mine can't." Clara stood, her legs trembling but her voice steady. "And neither can his. We're leaving, Caleb." She walked toward the door. Garrett's son moved to block her path. "The lady wants to leave, Marcus." Garrett's voice was mild, but his son hesitated. "Father!" "Let her pass." Marcus stepped aside, his eyes following Clara with an intensity that made her skin crawl. Caleb took Clara's arm, and together they walked out of that house, down the pristine steps, and into the waiting wagon. Neither spoke until they were well away from Garrett's land. "That was either very brave or very stupid," Caleb finally said. "Probably both." Clara was shaking now that the immediate danger had passed. "But I meant what I said. I won't be run off. Not again." Caleb pulled the wagon to a stop. In the moonlight, his face was pale but determined. "Neither will I." He turned to her, took both her hands in his. "Whatever he throws at us, we face it together. You and me. Partners." Clara's heart was racing, and not just from fear. Partners. He kissed her then. Not the gentle press of lips to knuckles, but a real kiss, desperate and tender, and full of everything neither of them had been brave enough to say. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Caleb rested his forehead against hers. "We're in trouble now," he murmured. "We were already in trouble." Different kind of trouble. His thumb traced her cheekbone. "The kind I never expected. The kind I don't want to run from." Clara closed her eyes. "Neither do I." They drove home through the darkness, hands intertwined, knowing that everything had changed, and knowing that the real fight was only just beginning. The kiss changed everything and nothing. They still rose before dawn, still worked the land until their muscles ached, still fell into exhausted silence at the end of each day. But now there were stolen glances across the breakfast table, fingers that brushed and lingered, a warmth between them that had nothing to do with the summer heat. Clara found herself smiling at odd moments, caught herself humming while she worked, felt something unfamiliar blooming in her chest, something she was afraid to name because naming it might make it disappear. Caleb was different too, lighter somehow. The permanent crease between his brows had softened. He laughed more easily, touched her more often, a hand on her back as he passed, a kiss pressed to her hair when he thought she wasn't paying attention. For 2 weeks they lived in a fragile bubble of happiness. Then Garrett struck. Clara was riding back from town on a Tuesday afternoon, her saddlebags full of supplies from Martha's store. The road was empty. The sun was high. She was thinking about supper, about whether Caleb would like the fabric she'd bought for new curtains, about the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. She didn't hear the horse until it was too late. Marcus Garrett appeared from behind a stand of cottonwoods, blocking the road. His smile made Clara's blood run cold. "Mrs. Morrison, fancy meeting you here." Clara pulled Maple to a stop, her heart hammering. "Let me pass." "Now that's not very friendly." Marcus urged his horse closer. "My father sent me to deliver a message." "I'm not interested in messages from your father." "You should be." His smile widened. "See, Pa's getting impatient. He's offered Morrison a fortune for that worthless piece of dirt, and Morrison keeps saying no. Pa thinks maybe Morrison needs some motivation." Clara's hand moved toward the rifle in her saddle holster. "Stay back." Marcus laughed. "He going to shoot me? A respectable rancher's son? They'd hang Morrison before sundown." "I said stay back." He kept coming. "Pa says if Morrison won't listen to reason, maybe his pretty wife will. Says you're an educated woman, smart. You must see this is a losing fight." Clara pulled the rifle free, aimed it at his chest. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. "One more step, and I pull this trigger. They can hang whoever they want afterward. You'll still be dead." Marcus stopped. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across his face. "You're bluffing." "Try me." They stared at each other for an endless moment. Clara's finger tightened on the trigger. She thought of Philadelphia, of the headmaster's hands on her shoulders, of all the times she'd been too afraid to fight back. Not anymore. "My father will hear about this," Marcus said finally, wheeling his horse around. "Good. Tell him I look forward to his next message. Tell him I'll have an answer for him." She watched him ride away, waiting until he was out of sight before lowering the rifle. Only then did she realize she was shaking so badly she could barely hold the reins. She rode home faster than was safe, pushing Maple hard, needing to see Caleb, needing to feel solid ground beneath her feet. He was in the barn when she arrived, and the look on her face brought him running. "What happened? Clara, what's wrong?" The words tumbled out. Marcus, the road, the threat, the rifle. Caleb's face went white, then red, then a dangerous shade of purple. "I'll kill him." "No," Clara grabbed his arm. "That's what they want. They want you to do something stupid, something they can use against you." "He threatened you, and I handled it." She forced him to meet her eyes. "I handled it, Caleb. He ran. He's the one who's scared now." Caleb's hands were clenched into fists at his sides. "I should have been there. I should have. You can't be everywhere. Neither can I." Clara touched his face, made him look at her. "But together, we can watch each other's backs. That's how we win this, not by running off half-cocked." He pulled her into his arms, held her so tightly she could barely breathe. "If anything had happened to you—" "It didn't. But if it had, Caleb—" She pulled back just enough to look at him. "I'm here. I'm safe. And I'm not going anywhere." He kissed her then, desperate and fierce, and Clara kissed him back with everything she had. That night, neither of them pretended to sleep apart. The town social was 2 days later. Clara hadn't wanted to go. After Marcus, the thought of being surrounded by people, some of whom whispered behind her back, some of whom might be in Garrett's pocket, made her want to lock the cabin door and never come out. But Martha Holloway was persistent. "You need to be seen," Martha had said when she'd stopped by the ranch. "Both of you, standing together, not hiding. If Garrett sees you hiding, he'll know his tactics are working. And if he tries something at the social? In front of the whole town? Even Silas Garrett isn't that bold." Martha's eyes were sharp. "Besides, I'll be there. Sarah Miller will be there. The Reverend's wife. Women talk, Clara. And right now, they need to hear your side of things." So Clara put on her blue dress, and Caleb put on his clean shirt, and they drove to town together as the summer evening turned the sky to gold. The schoolhouse was crowded. Music spilled from the open doors. Children ran and shouted while their parents clustered in groups, talking, laughing, pretending everything was normal. Clara felt every eye turn to her as she walked in on Caleb's arm. "Ignore them," he murmured. "I'm trying." Martha intercepted them immediately, tucking Clara's arm through hers like they were old friends. "Come, I want you to meet some people." For the next hour, Martha led Clara through the room, introducing her to women who'd only known her as gossip, as scandal, as the $2 bride. Clara answered questions about her teaching, about her father's farm, about her plans for the ranch garden. She smiled until her face ached. She pretended not to notice the whispers, and slowly, something shifted. Not everyone warmed to her. Some women kept their distance, their expressions cold. But others, the practical ones, the ones who'd struggled themselves, began to thaw. "You really taught school in Philadelphia?" one woman asked, genuine interest in her voice. "For 4 years, Girls' Academy." "We could use someone like you here. The new teacher is barely more than a child herself." Another woman leaned in. "Is it true you saved one of Morrison's cattle? Treated it yourself?"
Bloat. My father taught me. My husband's been losing calves to something similar. Maybe you could take a look? By the time the music started, Clara felt like she could breathe again. Not accepted, not fully, but no longer a pariah. It was a start. Caleb found her near the punch bowl. "You're amazing," he said quietly. "You know that?" Clara laughed, some of the tension finally releasing. "I'm exhausted is what I am. Dance with me." "Caleb." "Just one dance, then we can go." She let him lead her to the floor. His hand at her waist was warm and steady. They moved together more easily than the first time, their bodies learning each other's rhythms. "Thank you," Clara whispered. "For what?" "For making me come. For standing beside me. For everything." Caleb pulled her slightly closer. "Nowhere else I'd rather be." The song ended, but they didn't separate immediately. Just stood there, in the middle of the floor, looking at each other. Then someone screamed. Clara spun toward the sound. Near the door, a commotion had broken out. People were pushing, shouting. "Fire!" The words spread through the crowd like the flames it announced. "Fire at the Morrison Ranch!" Clara's blood turned to ice. They rode hard through the darkness, the wagon left behind for someone else to collect. The glow on the horizon grew brighter with every passing minute. "The barn," Caleb said, his voice dead. "It's the barn." By the time they arrived, the barn was fully engulfed. Flames clawed at the night sky. The horses screamed from the corral where they'd been trapped. "The animals!" Clara was off her horse before it fully stopped, running toward the corral gate. "Clara, wait!" She didn't listen. The horses were panicking, throwing themselves against the fence rails. If she didn't get them out, they'd either burn or break their legs trying to escape. She fumbled with the gate latch, her fingers clumsy with fear. The heat was intense, scorching her skin even from this distance. "Come on, come on!" The latch gave. The gate swung open. The horses bolted past her, nearly knocking her down in their terror. Caleb grabbed her, pulled her back from the flames just as part of the barn roof collapsed. "Are you insane?" He was shaking, whether from fear or fury, she couldn't tell. "You could have been killed!" "The horses aren't worth your life!" He gripped her shoulders, his eyes wild in the firelight. "Nothing is worth your life. Do you understand me? Nothing." Clara stared at him, at the tears cutting tracks through the soot on his face, at the raw terror in his expression. "I understand," she whispered. They stood together and watched the barn burn. There was nothing else to do, no way to save it. The water from the creek was too far, their buckets too small. All they could do was keep the flames from spreading to the cabin, keep the livestock away, and wait for dawn. By the time the sun rose, the barn was nothing but smoking rubble. Caleb walked through the ashes, kicking at blackened timbers. Clara watched him from a distance, afraid to intrude on his grief. The barn had held feed for the winter, tools, equipment, everything they needed to keep the ranch running. "We can rebuild." Her voice sounded hollow, even to her own ears. Caleb didn't turn around. "With what money?" "We'll find a way." "There is no way, Clara." He spun to face her, and she saw something she'd never seen in him before. Despair. "Don't you understand? This was his plan all along. Wear us down. Hit us where it hurts. Wait until we have nothing left." He gestured at the ruins. "And now we have nothing left." "We have each other." "That's not enough." The words burst out of him like a wound tearing open. "Love doesn't buy feed, doesn't repair fences, doesn't keep cattle alive through winter." Clara felt each word like a physical blow. "So what are you saying? You want to give up? Sell to Garrett?" "I'm saying maybe we should have never started this." Caleb's voice broke. Maybe I should have let you go at that auction. Found someone who could give you a real life, not this." "Don't you dare!" Clara's temper flared, hot and sudden. "Don't you dare use this as an excuse to push me away." "I'm not." "You are. You're scared and hurt, and you're trying to protect me by driving me off." She stepped closer, forcing him to look at her. "But I didn't survive Philadelphia and that auction and everything else just to run away when things get hard. I'm here, Caleb. I chose this. I chose you." "You didn't know what you were choosing." "Neither did you. That's what life is. You make choices without knowing how they'll turn out, and then you live with them." She grabbed his hands, held on tight. "We can rebuild. We can start over. As long as we're together, we can do anything." Caleb stared at her. The despair in his eyes flickered, warred with something else. "You really believe that?" "I have to, because the alternative is letting Garrett win, and I refuse to give that man one more thing." For a long moment, they just stood there, in the ashes of everything they'd built. Then Caleb pulled her into his arms, buried his face in her hair. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. Any of it. I know. I can't lose you. You won't." They held each other as the smoke curled around them. Two people with nothing left but each other, refusing to let go. The help came unexpectedly. Martha Holloway arrived that afternoon with her husband and 2 wagons full of supplies. Behind them came 3 other families, ranchers who'd lost property to Garrett's schemes, farmers who understood what it meant to watch everything burn. "Word travels fast," Martha said, climbing down from the wagon, "and some of us have long memories." "We can't accept," Caleb started. "You can, and you will." Martha's tone brooked no argument. "Every person here has needed help at some point. That's how we survive out here. We take care of each other." By evening, they'd cleared the worst of the debris. Plans were being drawn for a new barn, smaller than before, but sturdy. Promises of labor and materials were made. Clara watched it all with tears in her eyes. "This is because of you," Caleb said quietly, standing beside her. "They came because of you. Because you went to those meetings, talked to those women, showed them who you really are. They came because it's the right thing to do." Maybe. But they could have looked the other way. People do that all the time. They chose not to because of you. Clara leaned into him, exhausted but strangely hopeful. "Maybe there's more good in this town than we thought." "Maybe there is." As the helpers loaded up to leave, Sheriff Tom Dawson rode in. He was a weathered man in his 50s, more politician than lawman, known for keeping his head down and his loyalties flexible. "Morrison," he nodded at Caleb, tipped his hat to Clara. "Mrs. Morrison, heard about your trouble." "Did you?" Caleb's voice was flat. "Any idea how it started?" "You know exactly how it started. Same way the Hendricks lost their well. Same way the Abernathys have their barn collapse." The sheriff's face remained carefully neutral. "Those were accidents. And this," Caleb gestured at the ruins, "this was an accident too?" "Without proof. Marcus Garrett threatened my wife on the road 3 days ago. Told her his father was getting impatient. That sound like a coincidence to you?" Something flickered in the sheriff's eyes. "You have witnesses to this threat?" "Just me," Clara spoke up. "But I'll swear to it under oath, in front of anyone who'll listen." The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. "Ma'am, making accusations against a man like Silas Garrett is dangerous." "I know," Clara stepped forward. "Everything about standing up to men like him is dangerous. But I've been silent before, Sheriff. I've let powerful men get away with destroying lives because I was too afraid to speak. Not anymore." Dawson looked at her for a long moment. Something shifted in his expression.
guilt, maybe, or the faintest spark of conscience. "I'll look into it," he said finally. "Can't promise anything, but I'll look into it." "That's all we ask." After he rode away, Caleb turned to Clara. "You think he'll actually do anything?" "No, but I think he knows the truth now, and I think that bothers him more than he wants to admit." "That's not going to save our ranch." "No," Clara squeezed his hand. "But it's a start." 3 days later, Clara rode into town alone. She had a plan. It was risky, maybe foolish, but she was out of safer options. The Gazette office was a cramped building squeezed between the general store and the blacksmith. Clara tied Maple to the post and walked inside. Edmund Porter, the editor and sole reporter, looked up from his printing press. He was a small man with ink-stained fingers and sharp, curious eyes. "Mrs. Morrison, this is unexpected." "Mr. Porter, I have a story for you." She told him everything. The auction, the threats, the sabotage, the fire, Marcus Garrett's ambush on the road, the pattern of intimidation that had driven half a dozen families off their land. Porter listened without interrupting, his pen scratching rapid notes. "This is quite an accusation," he said when she finished. "It's the truth." "Can you prove it?" "I can prove the pattern. I have dates, incidents, names of families who've been run off. And I have my own testimony about Marcus Garrett." "Garrett will deny it. He'll call you a liar. He might even sue." Clara met his eyes steadily. "Are you afraid of him, Mr. Porter?" The editor was quiet for a long moment. Then he laughed, a short, bitter sound. "My wife has been telling me for years that I'm a coward, that I see what Garrett does, and I look the other way because it's easier." He set down his pen. "Maybe she's right. Maybe it's time I remembered why I started this paper in the first place." "You'll print the story?" "I'll investigate it first. Talk to the families you mentioned. See if the pattern holds." He looked at her with new respect. "But if it does, yes, I'll print it." Clara felt something loosen in her chest. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. This could make things worse before it makes them better." "I know, but at least everyone will know the truth. And truth has a way of spreading, even when powerful men try to bury it." She was almost to the door when Porter called after her. "Mrs. Morrison, you're either the bravest woman I've ever met, or the most reckless." Clara smiled grimly. "Most days, I can't tell the difference." Caleb was waiting when she got home. His expression told her someone had already talked. "You went to the newspaper?" "Yes." "Without telling me. Would you have tried to stop me?" He opened his mouth, closed it again. "Probably." "That's why I didn't tell you." "Clara," he ran his hands through his hair, frustration and fear warring on his face. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Garrett won't just threaten us now. He'll come after you with everything he has." "He was already going to do that." Clara stood her ground. "The barn proved that. He's not going to stop just because we stay quiet. The only chance we have is to make this public, make people see what he really is." "And if it doesn't work? If nobody believes you?" "Then at least I tried." She walked toward him, took his hands. "I spent years letting fear control me, letting other people decide my fate. I'm done with that, Caleb." "Whatever happens next, I want it to be because I chose to fight, not because I chose to hide." Caleb stared at her. The fear didn't leave his face, but something else joined it. Pride. Love. "You're going to be the death of me," he said softly. "Maybe, but not today." The newspaper came out on Friday. Clara didn't read it until afternoon,
when Martha Holloway rode out to the ranch with a copy clutched in her hands. "You did it," Martha said, her face flushed with excitement. "You actually did it." The story took up half the front page. Pattern of intimidation alleged against prominent rancher. Porter had been thorough. He'd interviewed 3 families who'd been run off their land. He'd documented suspicious accidents, mysterious fires, wells gone dry at convenient moments. And he'd printed Clara's account of Marcus Garrett's threat, word for word. "The town's buzzing," Martha reported. "Half the people think you're a hero. The other half think you've lost your mind."
"What about Garrett?" Martha's excitement dimmed. "He's furious. Went to the Gazette office this morning. Threatened to destroy Porter if he didn't print a retraction." "Did Porter agree?" "Porter told him to go to hell," Martha actually laughed. "Said he'd been waiting 20 years to say that." Clara should have felt victorious. Instead, she felt sick with dread. "This isn't over." "No," Martha agreed. "It's just beginning." The attack came that night. Clara woke to the sound of hoofbeats. Multiple horses, coming fast. "Caleb!" He was already up, reaching for his rifle. "Stay inside." "No!" "Clara!" "We face this together. You said so yourself." His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. He handed her the pistol from the drawer. They stepped onto the porch just as 5 riders pulled up in the yard. In the moonlight, Clara recognized Marcus Garrett at the front. The other men were strangers, hired hands probably. "Morrison!" Marcus's voice was slurred, drunk. "Come out and face me like a man." "I'm here." Caleb's voice was calm. "What do you want?" "You know what I want. Your wife's been telling lies about my family, dragging our name through the mud." Everything she said was true. "It's slander." Marcus dismounted clumsily, nearly falling. "And someone's going to pay for it." Clara stepped forward, raising her voice. "I wrote that story, Marcus, not my husband. If you have a problem, take it up with me." Marcus squinted at her in the darkness. "The $2 whore thinks she can talk to me? My father should have bought you when he had the chance. Would have taught you your place." Caleb raised his rifle. "Get off my land." "Or what? You'll shoot me?" Marcus spread his arms wide. "Go ahead. Give me a reason. Give my father a reason to destroy you legally instead of just running you off." "He's trying to provoke you," Clara murmured. "Don't give him what he wants." One of the other riders spoke up. "Come on, Marcus. This isn't what your father wanted." "Shut up!" Marcus pulled his own pistol, waving it erratically. "I'm in charge here, and I say—" The gunshot split the night. Clara screamed. For one terrible moment, she thought Caleb had been hit. But it was Marcus who crumpled, clutching his arm. His pistol clattered to the ground. Behind him, still mounted, one of his own men lowered a smoking gun. "I said that's enough." The man's voice was calm. "Mr. Garrett Sr. gave specific instructions. Scare them. Don't hurt them. You just pulled a gun on an unarmed woman." "She had a pistol," which she never raised. The man looked at Caleb. "Take your wife inside, Morrison. This is over." "Over?" Caleb's voice shook with rage. "He threatened to, and he's been stopped. Consider it a professional courtesy." The man tipped his hat. "You won't be bothered again tonight." The riders collected Marcus, still cursing, still bleeding, and disappeared into the darkness as quickly as they'd come. Clara stood frozen on the porch, pistol still clutched in her trembling hands. "What just happened?" Caleb shook his head slowly. "I don't know, but I think Garrett's men just showed us that even his own people have limits. Or that Garrett is smart enough to know when his son is about to ruin everything." They went inside. Caleb barred the door. Neither of them slept. and somewhere in the darkness, Clara began to believe that maybe, just maybe, they might actually survive this. Dawn broke gray and heavy over the ranch. Clara hadn't slept. Neither had Caleb. They sat at the kitchen table, cold coffee between them, waiting for whatever would come next. "We should leave," Caleb said finally. "Take what we can carry and go. Start over somewhere else." Clara looked at him, dark circles under his eyes, shoulders slumped with exhaustion. He looked 10 years older than he had the day she'd met him. "Is that what you want?" "What I want doesn't matter. What matters is keeping you safe." "And what about Lucy?" Clara's voice was gentle but firm. "What about everything you built here? Everything she helped you dream about?" Caleb flinched at his sister's name. "Lucy's gone." "But her memory isn't, and neither is ours." Clara reached across the table, took his hands. "Running won't make us safe, Caleb. Men like Garrett don't forget, don't forgive. If we run, he wins, and he'll spend the rest of his life knowing he can do whatever he wants to whoever he wants." "So what do you suggest? Wait for him to send more men? Wait for Marcus to come back and finish what he started?" "I suggest we fight. Not with guns, with the truth." Clara squeezed his hands. "The newspaper story is just the beginning. People are talking, asking questions. For the first time, Garrett has to answer for what he's done." "Talking doesn't stop bullets." "No, but it stops silence. And silence is what lets men like him thrive." Before Caleb could respond, the sound of approaching horses made them both freeze. Caleb grabbed his rifle. Clara moved to the window. "It's the sheriff," she said, surprised. "And he's not alone." They stepped onto the porch together as Sheriff Dawson dismounted, followed by 2 deputies. His face was grim, unreadable. "Morrison, Mrs. Morrison?" He tipped his hat. "Mind if we come inside?" "Depends on why you're here." The sheriff's jaw tightened. "I'm here because something happened last night that's going to change everything in this town, and you need to hear it from me before you hear it from anyone else." Clara's heart clenched. "What happened?" Dawson met her eyes. "Silas Garrett is dead." The words didn't make sense at first. Clara heard them, but her mind refused to process them. Silas Garrett, the man who had haunted their lives for months, who had burned their barn, threatened their existence, sent his son to terrorize them, was dead? How? Caleb's voice was hoarse. "Shot in his own study, sometime after midnight." The sheriff removed his hat, turned it in his hands. "His son Marcus found him this morning." Clara's knees went weak. She gripped the porch rail for support. "And you think we did it?" Dawson's silence was answer enough. "We were here all night," Caleb said, anger rising in his voice. "Marcus and his men came to the ranch around midnight, threatened us. One of his own people shot him in the arm to stop him." "I know. Marcus told me." The sheriff's expression remained carefully neutral. "He also told me his father was alive when they left here, that he went home, got patched up, and found his father dead an hour later." "And you believe him?" "I believe the timeline is convenient for someone." Clara stepped forward. "Sheriff Dawson, we didn't leave this ranch last night. We had no way to get to Garrett's place and back without being seen. And frankly, we had no reason to. Marcus was the one threatening us. Marcus was the one who pulled a gun on me, not his father." "His father was the one behind everything," Dawson said quietly. "Everyone knows that, including you." Knowing something and killing someone over it are 2 very different things. The sheriff studied her for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he nodded. "I believe you, Mrs. Morrison. Both of you." He put his hat back on. "But belief and proof are two different things too. And right now, half the town thinks you had motive, means, and opportunity. So what happens now? Now I investigate. Talk to everyone who saw anything. Try to figure out what really happened. Dawson mounted his horse. In the meantime, I'd suggest you stay close to home. Don't give anyone reason to point fingers.
We're already being pointed at, Caleb said bitterly.
Then don't give them ammunition. The sheriff turned his horse. I'll be in touch. They watched him ride away, the deputies trailing behind.
This is wrong, Clara said. Something about this is very wrong.
Garrett's dead. That's the only thing that matters.
Is it?
She turned to face him.
Think about it, Caleb. Why would someone kill Garrett now? Right after the newspaper story? Right after Marcus attacked us? It's too perfect, too convenient.
Maybe one of the families he destroyed finally got revenge.
Or maybe someone wanted it to look that way. Clara's mind was racing. Someone who benefits from Garrett being gone and us being blamed for it.
Understanding dawned in Caleb's eyes. Marcus.
He inherits everything. The ranch, the businesses, the power. And if we're arrested for murder,
no one will believe anything we said about the Garretts. Caleb's face went pale. The newspaper story becomes the ravings of desperate killers trying to justify their crime. Exactly. They stared at each other, the full horror of their situations sinking in. We need proof, Clara said. We need to find out who really killed Silas Garrett. How? We're not investigators. We're ranchers. We're survivors. Clara's jaw set with determination. And we know this town better than Marcus thinks we do. The funeral was 3 days later. Half the territory turned out to pay respects to Silas Garrett, or at least to be seen paying respects. Politicians, businessmen, ranchers who'd benefited from Garrett's schemes or feared his reach. Clara and Caleb watched from a distance, standing apart from the crowd.
Look at them, Clara murmured. Half of them hated him. The other half were terrified of him. And now they're all pretending he was a saint.
That's how it works with powerful men.
Not for long.
Clara's eyes tracked Marcus Garrett, standing graveside in his black suit, accepting condolences with an expression of practiced grief.
Look at him. He's not mourning. He's calculating.
Clara, I'm going to talk to him. What? No, absolutely not. But she was already walking toward the grave, her head high, her steps deliberate. Caleb had no choice but to follow. The crowd parted as she approached. Whispers followed her like a wake.
Can't believe she'd show her face. Some nerve after what she did. No proof, though, is there?
Clara ignored them all. She stopped directly in front of Marcus Garrett.
My condolences on your loss.
Marcus's eyes narrowed. Up close, she could see the bandage on his arm where his own man had shot him. Mrs. Morrison, bold of you to come.
I have nothing to hide.
Don't you? His voice was soft, meant only for her.
My father is dead. Someone killed him, and you had more reason than anyone.
So did you. The words hung between them. Marcus's composure cracked for just a moment, a flash of something dark and dangerous in his eyes. Be careful, he said quietly. You're a long way from Philadelphia, and there's no one to protect you out here.
You're wrong about that.
Clara didn't flinch.
I've learned to protect myself.
She turned and walked away, feeling his eyes boring into her back. Caleb fell into step beside her.
What did he say?
Nothing he hasn't said before. Threats, intimidation. Clara kept her voice low.
But I saw something in his eyes when I mentioned his father. Fear. He's hiding something.
Everyone hides something.
Not like this.
Clara glanced back over her shoulder. Marcus was watching them,
his expression cold as stone. "He killed his father, Caleb. I'm sure of it. I just need to prove it." The proof came from an unexpected source. Martha Holloway arrived at the ranch 2 days later, her face flushed with urgency. "I found something," she said without preamble, pressing a folded paper into Clara's hands. "One of my girls works at the Garrett house, cleaning, cooking, that sort of thing. She heard things that night. Saw things." Clara unfolded the paper. It was covered in neat, careful handwriting. "Marcus and his father had a fight that evening, before Marcus rode out to your place. My girl heard shouting, something about the newspaper story, about how Marcus's stupidity was ruining everything. That's not proof of murder. Keep reading." Clara's eyes scanned the page. Her breath caught. She saw Marcus return to the house, alone, after the other men had gone home, around 2 in the morning. She heard a gunshot. Then she heard Marcus call for help, saying he'd found his father dead. But he was there when it happened. Or made it happen. Martha's eyes were bright with vindication. She's willing to testify. She's scared, but she's willing. Clara looked at Caleb, hope blooming in her chest for the first time in days. This could change everything. "It could also get that girl killed," Caleb said grimly. "If Marcus finds out she's talking." "He won't. Not until it's too late." Clara gripped the paper like a lifeline. "We need to get this to the sheriff. Now." Sheriff Dawson read the testimony 3 times. His face gave nothing away, but Clara saw something shift in his eyes. Doubt. Calculation. Maybe even relief. "This girl," he said finally. "She's willing to swear to this in court." "Yes." "She understands what that means, going against the most powerful family in the territory." "She understands that a man was murdered, and that the wrong people might hang for it if she stays silent." Dawson was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood, reaching for his hat. "Where are you going?" "To arrest Marcus Garrett." Clara felt her knees go weak. "Just like that?" "Just like that, Mrs. Morrison." The sheriff paused at the door. "I told you I believe in proof. This is proof. Maybe not enough for a conviction, but enough to ask some very hard questions." His expression softened slightly. "And between you and me, I've been waiting a long time for someone to stand up to that family. I'm glad it was you." The arrest happened at sundown. Word spread through Miller's Crossing like wildfire. Marcus Garrett hauled out of his father's house in handcuffs, shouting protests and threats that nobody listened to anymore. Clara and Caleb watched from the edge of the crowd that had gathered in the street. "Is it over?" Clara whispered. "I don't know." Caleb's arm tightened around her. "But it's something." Marcus caught sight of them as the deputies led him toward the jail. His face contorted with rage. "This isn't finished," he screamed. "You hear me? This isn't finished. I'll destroy you. I'll destroy everything you love." Clara met his eyes steadily. "You already tried." They walked home in silence as the stars came out overhead. The ranch looked different somehow. Smaller, but safer. A haven instead of a prison. "What do we do now?" Caleb asked as they stood on the porch. Clara leaned into him, exhausted but strangely at peace. "We rebuild. Same as always." "And if Marcus gets off? If he has lawyers and connections and—" "Then we'll face that when it comes." She turned to look at him. "But right now, tonight, I want to stop worrying about tomorrow. I want to remember why we fought so hard to keep this place." Caleb's hand came up to cup her face. "And why is that?" "Because it's home." Clara smiled through tears she hadn't realized she was crying. "Because you're here. because for the first time in my life, I have something worth fighting for." He kissed her then, gentle and fierce all at once. She kissed him back with everything she had, all the fear and hope and love she'd been afraid to name. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Caleb rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Clara Morrison." The words hit her like a physical force. She'd known, of course, had felt it in his actions, his protection, his presence. But hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a way nothing else could. "I love you too." Her voice broke on the words. "I didn't think I'd ever say that again. Didn't think I could trust anyone enough to mean it." And now? Now I can't imagine not saying it. Every day. For the rest of our lives. They went inside together, and for the first time since the fire, since the threats, since the fear that had become their constant companion, they simply lived. Morning found them tangled together, sunlight streaming through the window. Clara woke first, watching Caleb sleep. The lines of worry on his face had smoothed in rest. He looked younger, peaceful. She slipped out of bed quietly, pulled on her robe, and padded to the window. The ranch stretched out before her, still scarred from the fire, but healing. The new barn frame was rising, helped by neighbors who'd become friends. The garden she'd planted was thriving, despite everything. And beyond it all, the mountains stood eternal, unchanged by the small dramas of human lives. She'd come here with nothing, a carpet bag full of worn clothes and broken dreams, a price tag of $2 hanging over her head. Now she had a home, a purpose, a man who loved her not for what she could give him, but for who she was. She had hope. The trial began 3 weeks later. Clara testified for 2 hours, recounting every threat, every attack, every moment of fear Marcus Garrett had inflicted on her and Caleb. She told the jury about Philadelphia, about what had driven her west, about the strength she'd found in the most unlikely place. The servant girl testified too, her voice trembling but clear. She described the gunshot she'd heard, the time, the way Marcus had been alone in the house with his father at the moment of death. Marcus's lawyers argued and objected and tried every trick they knew. But the evidence was damning. The witnesses were credible, and the jury, made up of ordinary people who'd lived under Garrett's shadow for too long, was ready to believe. The verdict came on a Friday afternoon. Guilty. The word echoed through the courtroom, followed by gasps and murmurs, and finally, impossibly, applause. Clara sat frozen in her seat, unable to process what she was hearing. Caleb's hand found hers, squeezed tight. "It's over," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "It's really over. I can't believe it." Believe it. Martha Holloway appeared beside them, her face wet with tears. "You did this, Clara. You and that stubborn spine of yours. You brought down the most powerful family in the territory." "We all did it. Everyone who testified. Everyone who spoke up. But you started it. You refused to be silent when silence was easier." Martha pulled her into a fierce hug. "Don't ever let anyone tell you that one person can't make a difference. You're proof that they can." Outside the courthouse, Clara and Caleb were surrounded by well-wishers. People who'd doubted them. People who'd whispered behind their backs. Now they were shaking hands, offering congratulations, treating Clara and Caleb like heroes. "Funny how quick people change their tune," Caleb observed dryly. "Let them." Clara leaned into his side. "I don't need them to believe in me. I just need you. You've got me." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Always." They drove home as the sun began its descent toward the mountains. The road was familiar now, every curve, every landmark,
every stretch of open land that meant they were getting closer to home. "What do we do now?" Clara asked, echoing the question Caleb had asked weeks ago. "Now we live." He turned to look at her, and she saw the future in his eyes. Not just survival, but something more, something better. "We build up the herd, finish the barn, plant that orchard you've been talking about." "That's a lot of work." "Good thing there's two of us." Clara smiled, a real smile, free of fear for the first time in longer than she could remember. "Two of us," she agreed. "For now." Caleb's eyes widened. "For now? Clara, are you—" "I don't know yet. It's too early to tell." She took his hand, placed it over her stomach. "But I think, maybe. I hope, maybe." Caleb pulled the wagon to a stop right there in the middle of the road. He turned to her, his face transformed by something like wonder. "A baby?" "Maybe a baby. I'm not certain. But maybe. Maybe." He let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and pulled her into his arms so tightly she could barely breathe. "I didn't think. I never imagined." He couldn't seem to finish a sentence. "Clara, I know." She held him just as tight. "I know." They stayed that way for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms on a dusty road in the middle of Montana Territory. Two people who'd found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from the ruins of their broken lives. When they finally pulled apart, Caleb's eyes were wet. "Let's go home," he said softly. Clara smiled. "Let's go home." And as the wagon rolled forward, toward the ranch that was no longer just a struggle, but a promise, Clara thought about how strange life was, how the worst moments could lead to the best ones, how a $2 bid at a desperate auction could become the foundation of everything she'd ever wanted. She thought about Lucy Morrison, who died dreaming of a future she'd never see. She thought about her father, who taught her that strength wasn't about never falling. It was about getting back up. She thought about the child who might be growing inside her, who would be born into a world that was hard and unfair and beautiful all at once. And she thought about Caleb, her partner, her protector, her love. $2. That's what he'd paid for her. And she'd given him hope in return. It seemed, Clara thought as the ranch came into view, like a fair trade after all. The pregnancy was confirmed 3 weeks later. Dr. Miller examined Clara in his small office, while Caleb paced the waiting room like a caged animal. Martha Holloway had insisted on coming, sitting calmly with her knitting, while Caleb wore a path in the floorboards. "You're going to collapse if you don't sit down," Martha observed. "I can't sit." "The baby's not coming today, Caleb. It's barely the size of a bean." "What if something's wrong? What if the stress of everything, the fire, the trial?" The door opened. Dr. Miller emerged with Clara behind him, her face glowing. "Congratulations, Mr. Morrison. You're going to be a father." Caleb's knees buckled. He grabbed the nearest chair to steady himself. "A father," he repeated, the word foreign on his tongue. "I'm going to be a father." Clara crossed to him, took his hands. "Are you all right?" "I don't know," he laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. "I think I might need to sit down." "I told you so," Martha said smugly. They drove home in a daze, Caleb handling the reins with exaggerated care, avoiding every rut and bump in the road. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass," Clara said, amused. "The doctor said you need rest." "The doctor said I need to continue my normal activities. There's a difference." "Normal activities don't include hauling water and mucking stalls." Clara raised an eyebrow. "Then who's going to do it?" "I will. I'll do everything." "For 6 months, while running the ranch alone?" She shook her head.
Caleb, I appreciate the thought, but I'm not an invalid.
Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. Women have also died having babies since the beginning of time. The words hung between them, heavy with fear. Clara reached over and covered his hand with hers. I'm strong. The baby's healthy. Dr. Miller said everything looks perfect. She squeezed gently. We've survived Silas Garrett and his son. We've survived fires and threats and a trial that could have destroyed us. We're not going to let fear steal this joy. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Then he lifted her hand to his lips. You're right. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be excited, Clara smiled. We're having a baby, Caleb. After everything we've been through, we're bringing new life into this world. A Morrison baby, raised on Montana soil. Wonder crept into his voice. Lucy would have been so happy. She's watching, I'm sure of it. They rode the rest of the way in peaceful silence, hands intertwined, hearts full of something neither had dared to hope for. The news spread quickly through Miller's Crossing. Clara Morrison, the $2 bride, was expecting. The woman who'd stood up to the most powerful family in the territory, who'd testified in court and helped bring a murderer to justice, was going to be a mother. Opinions varied, as opinions always did. That child will be born into a good home, Martha Holloway declared at the Ladies' Aid Society meeting. Mark my words. If they can hold on to that ranch, someone muttered. Winter's coming. They lost their barn, lost their savings fighting the Garretts. They'll manage. They always do. Clara, who'd been invited to the meeting for the first time, sat quietly and listened. A year ago, these women had whispered about her behind her back. Now they debated her future openly, as if she were one of them. Maybe she was. Mrs. Morrison. Sarah Miller leaned toward her. How are you feeling? Really? Tired, nauseous, happy, Clara smiled. Terrified. That's motherhood. It doesn't get less terrifying, I'm afraid. Do you regret it, having children? Sarah's face softened. Not for a single moment. Even the hard parts, especially the hard parts, they're worth it. Because you're building something that matters, something that lasts beyond you. Clara placed a hand on her still flat stomach. I never thought I'd have this. For so long I thought my life was over, that I'd ruined everything. And now? Now I think maybe the worst things that happened to me were just leading me here, to this place, to these people. She looked around the room at the women who'd become her community. To this life I never could have imagined. The baby quickened in late October. Clara was hanging laundry when she felt it. A flutter, like butterfly wings against her insides. She froze, one hand pressed to her belly, hardly daring to breathe. Caleb! He came running from the barn, face white with panic. What is it? What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Clara grabbed his hand, pressed it against her stomach. Wait. Just wait. They stood there in the autumn sunshine, barely breathing, until it came again. That tiny movement, that unmistakable sign of life. Caleb's eyes went wide. Was that the baby, moving? Clara laughed through sudden tears. Our baby is moving. He dropped to his knees right there in the dirt, pressed his face against her belly, his shoulders shaking. Hey there, little one. His voice was rough with emotion. It's your pa. I know you can't hear me yet, but I want you to know something. You're coming into a world that can be hard and mean and unfair. But you're also coming into a family that will love you, protect you, fight for you. Clara ran her fingers through his hair, her own tears falling freely. You're going to be a wonderful father. I'm going to try. He looked up at her. That's all any of us can do, right? Try? That's all anyone can ask. He stood, pulled her into his arms, held her close while the baby fluttered between them.
Thank you, he whispered. For what? For staying, for fighting, for giving me a reason to believe in tomorrow again. Clara pressed her face into his shoulder. You gave me the same thing. From the moment you put those $2 on that auction block. Best investment I ever made. You keep saying that. Because it keeps being true. The new barn was finished in November. The whole town turned out for the raising, neighbors working side by side to build something that would shelter animals and store feed and represent everything Caleb and Clara had fought to keep. Clara watched from the porch, one hand on her growing belly, as Caleb directed the work. He moved differently now, with confidence, with purpose. The haunted man she'd met at the auction was gone, replaced by someone who'd found his place in the world. You look happy. Clara turned to find Martha beside her, 2 cups of cider in her hands. I am happy. Clara accepted the cup gratefully. Is that allowed? After everything that happened? It's required. Martha's eyes were warm. You earned this happiness, Clara. Every single moment of it. Sometimes I'm afraid it will all disappear. That I'll wake up and find out it was a dream. It's not a dream. It's your life. Martha nodded toward Caleb, who was laughing at something one of the other ranchers had said. Look at him. Look at what you've built together. That's real. That's permanent. Nothing's permanent. Love is. The right kind of love, anyway. The kind that survives fire and fear and all the ugly things people do to each other. Martha squeezed Clara's arm. That's what you have with him. Don't let fear steal it from you. Clara nodded slowly, the baby shifting inside her as if in agreement. I won't, she promised. Not ever again. The first snow came early that year. Clara woke to find the world blanketed in white, the mountains hidden behind curtains of falling flakes. She lay in bed, watching the snow through the window, feeling the baby move lazily inside her. Caleb stirred beside her. What time is it? Early. Go back to sleep. Can't. He rolled toward her, propped himself on one elbow. Thinking too much. About what? Names. His hand found her belly, rested there gently. What are we going to call this child? Clara had been thinking about it too, had been making lists in her head, discarding options, circling back to the same few choices. If it's a boy, she said carefully, I'd like to name him Thomas, after your brother. Something flickered in Caleb's eyes. Grief, gratitude, love all tangled together. Thomas, he repeated softly. Thomas Morrison. Unless you'd rather... No, it's perfect. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. Tom would have been honored. And if it's a girl? Caleb was quiet for a moment. Lucy, after my sister. Clara felt her eyes sting. Lucy Morrison. I love it. She was supposed to have a dozen nieces and nephews. Used to tease me about being slow to settle down. His voice caught. She would have loved you, Clara. Would have been your biggest champion. Tell me about her. So he did. As the snow fell and the fire crackled and their baby shifted between them, Caleb talked about Lucy. Her laugh, her stubbornness, her unshakable belief that good things were coming, even when evidence suggested otherwise. She sounds wonderful. She was, and she would have said... He stopped, cleared his throat. She would have said that everything happens for a reason, that losing her brought you to me, that her death made room for new life. Do you believe that? I don't know, but I believe she would have wanted me to be happy, and I'm happier than I ever thought possible. He kissed her, soft and slow. Because of you. The contraction started on a January night, so cold the water in the basin froze. Clara woke, gasping, gripping Caleb's arm hard enough to leave bruises. It's time, she managed. Get Martha. Get the doctor.
Caleb was out of bed before she finished speaking, pulling on clothes with shaking hands. "I'll be back. Don't move. Just breathe." "I'm not going anywhere." He paused at the door, terror and excitement warring on his face. "I love you." "I love you too. Now go." The next hours blurred together, pain and pressure, and Martha's calm voice coaching her through each contraction. Dr. Miller arrived as dawn broke, his examination confirming what Clara's body already knew. "Nearly there, Mrs. Morrison. You're doing beautifully." "I don't feel beautiful." She gripped Caleb's hand as another wave hit. "I feel like I'm being torn apart." "That's normal." "How is that normal?" But then the urge to push overwhelmed everything else, and there was no more room for questions. Just effort. Just survival. Just the primal need to bring her child into the world. "I can see the head," Dr. Miller's voice cut through the haze. "One more push, Clara. Just one more." She bore down with everything she had, screaming through clenched teeth, and then suddenly there was release, and a cry. A thin, wailing cry that was the most beautiful sound she'd ever heard. "A girl!" Martha was laughing and crying at the same time. "You have a daughter!" Caleb made a sound she'd never heard from him before, somewhere between a sob and a prayer. "A daughter. Clara, we have a daughter." They placed the baby on Clara's chest, still bloody and squirming and absolutely perfect. Tiny fingers, tiny toes. A shock of dark hair plastered to her scalp. "Hello, Lucy," Clara whispered, tears streaming down her face. "We've been waiting for you." The baby stopped crying at the sound of her mother's voice, dark eyes blinking open to stare at the strange new world she'd entered. "She's beautiful." Caleb's voice was wrecked. "She looks like you." "She looks like herself." Clara traced a finger over her daughter's cheek. "Our little Lucy. Lucy Morrison." Caleb bent to press a kiss to the baby's forehead. "Welcome to the family." Outside, the sun was rising over the mountains, painting the snow in shades of pink and gold. Inside, a family of 3 huddled together, exhausted and terrified, and more full of love than any of them had known possible. The first year of Lucy's life passed in a blur. Sleepless nights, first smiles, first words that might have been words, or might have been random sounds, but felt like miracles either way. Clara and Caleb took turns walking the floor with their colicky infant, traded off duties so the other could rest, learned to function on 4 hours of sleep and prayers. "I didn't know exhaustion could be a physical sensation," Caleb groaned one morning, slumped over his coffee. "Welcome to parenthood," Clara bounced Lucy on her hip, the baby finally quiet after a difficult night. "It gets easier." "When?" "I have no idea. I'm just repeating what Martha told me." But it did get easier. Slowly, incrementally, they found their rhythm. Lucy grew from infant to crawler to toddler, her personality emerging in fierce, stubborn bursts that reminded Clara uncomfortably of herself. "She has your spirit," Caleb observed after Lucy threw her bowl of porridge across the kitchen in protest of being told no. "My spirit or my temper?" "Both," he was grinning. "Heaven help us all." The ranch prospered too. The herd grew. The new barn held. The garden Clara had planted expanded each year, feeding not just their family, but contributing to the growing community market in town. And then, just after Lucy's 2nd birthday, Clara discovered she was pregnant again. "2 children," she breathed, staring at herself in the mirror, trying to imagine their small cabin full of even more noise and chaos and love. Caleb came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. "Scared?" "Terrified." "Me too." He pressed a kiss to her neck. "But the good kind of terrified." "Is there a good kind?" "The kind where you're scared because something matters so much. That's the good kind. The second baby arrived in November, sliding into the world with none of his sister's drama. A quiet, peaceful birth that left Clara weeping with relief and gratitude. "A boy," Dr. Miller announced. "Congratulations again, Mr. and Mrs. Morrison." Thomas Morrison entered the world with his father's gray eyes and his mother's copper hair. He rarely cried, slept through the night almost from the beginning, watched the world with a thoughtful expression that made Clara wonder what wisdom lived behind those infant eyes. "He's so different from Lucy," she marveled. Every child is their own person. Caleb held his son against his chest, the baby's tiny hand wrapped around his finger. "This one's going to be the thinker. Lucy's going to be the fighter. And together? Together they're going to be unstoppable." 5 years after the auction, Clara stood on the porch of their expanded cabin and watched her children play in the yard. Lucy, now 6, was bossing her 3-year-old brother around as usual, directing some elaborate game involving horses and outlaws and a dramatic rescue. Thomas followed her lead patiently, adding his own quiet suggestions that Lucy occasionally deigned to consider. Caleb came up beside her, dusty from a day in the fields, and wrapped an arm around her waist.
"What are you thinking about?" Clara leaned into him.
"The day we met. That auction. Those $2 silver. Feels like a lifetime ago. Doesn't it?" She turned to look at him, this man who'd saved her without meaning to, who'd given her a home and a purpose and a love she'd never expected. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't bid?" "Every day." His arm tightened around her. "And every day I thank God I did." "Mama!" Lucy came running, her dark braids flying behind her. "Thomas says he wants to be the outlaw, but I already said I'm the outlaw." "Why can't you both be outlaws?" "Because there's only one outlaw in the story." "Then maybe you need a bigger story, one with room for 2 outlaws." Lucy considered this with the serious deliberation of a child for whom such matters were of utmost importance. "I guess that could work." "I think so too." The child ran back to her brother, already adjusting the narrative to accommodate this new development. Thomas accepted his promotion to outlaw with the same quiet grace he brought to everything. "She's going to be something, that one," Caleb said. "They both will. This whole territory isn't going to know what hit it." The annual town social was held that evening, the same social where, years ago, Clara had first danced with Caleb. The same social that had been interrupted by news of the fire that nearly destroyed them. Now she walked through the doors on her husband's arm, their children racing ahead to join the other young ones, and felt nothing but belonging. "Mrs. Morrison!" Sarah Miller embraced her warmly. "You look wonderful." "Thank you, though I'm fairly sure I have oatmeal in my hair." "That's motherhood. It never comes out." The evening passed in a pleasant blur of conversation and laughter, and watching Lucy drag Thomas onto the dance floor for a clumsy waltz. Clara found herself surrounded by women who'd once whispered about her, women who were now friends, confidants, fellow survivors of the frontier life. "Hard to believe it's been 5 years," Martha observed, pressing a cup of punch into Clara's hands. "Harder to believe everything that happened in those 5 years." "You've built something remarkable, Clara. Not just the ranch, though Lord knows that's impressive enough. You've built a family, a community, a legacy. We built it together, Caleb and me. That's what marriage is supposed to be." Martha's eyes were warm. 2 people building something neither could build alone. Caleb appeared at Clara's elbow. "May I have this dance?" "You're supposed to ask at the beginning of the song, not the middle." "I've never been good at timing. You know that." He grinned and pulled her onto the floor. They danced the way they'd learned to do everything, imperfectly, often stepping on each other's feet, but moving together in a rhythm that was entirely their own. "Thank you," Clara said as the song drew to a close. "For what?" "For asking me to dance, for bidding on me at that auction, for every single day since." Caleb pulled her closer. "I'd do it all again, every moment, every struggle, every fear." "Even the fire?" "Even the fire." He kissed her forehead. "Because it all led to this. To us. To them." He nodded toward their children, now collapsed in a giggling heap in the corner with their friends. "I used to think my life was over," Clara said softly. "When everything fell apart in Philadelphia, I thought that was it. The end of my story. And now? Now I know it was just the beginning. The real beginning." They left the social as the stars came out. Lucy asleep in Caleb's arms, Thomas drowsing against Clara's shoulder. The wagon creaked along the familiar road home, and Clara watched the mountains silhouetted against the night sky. "Mama?" Lucy stirred slightly, her voice thick with sleep. "Yes, sweetheart? Tell me the story again, about how you and Papa met." Clara smiled, exchanging a glance with Caleb over their children's heads. "Once upon a time, there was a man with only $2 to his name, and there was a woman who thought nobody would ever want her. But Papa wanted you. Yes, your Papa saw something everyone else missed. He saw that the things people thought made me worthless, my stubbornness, my independence, my unwillingness to give up, were actually the things that made me strong." "And then you got married?" "Eventually. First we had to learn to trust each other, to work together, to build something worth fighting for. And now you have us. And now we have you." Clara pressed a kiss to her daughter's hair. "The greatest treasure of all." Lucy was asleep again before they reached the ranch, but Clara kept talking anyway. The words meant for Caleb as much as for their children. "I used to be afraid all the time. Afraid of being hurt again. Afraid of losing everything again. Afraid that happiness was something other people got, not me. And now?" Clara looked at the cabin coming into view, at the barn they'd rebuilt together, at the life they'd created from nothing but hope and determination and $2 silver. "Now I know that fear is just the shadow that hope casts. You can't have one without the other. And I'd rather live in the light, even knowing the shadow is there, than hide in darkness forever." They put the children to bed together, a nightly ritual that had become sacred. Lucy in her small bed with the quilt Martha had made her. Thomas in his crib, though he was rapidly outgrowing it. Then they stood together in the main room of the cabin that had become their home, and Clara pulled something from her pocket. "Happy anniversary." Caleb took the small box, confused. "Our anniversary's not until—" "Not that anniversary. This is the anniversary of the auction. 5 years ago today, you put $2 on that block and changed both our lives forever." He opened the box. Inside, on a delicate gold chain, hung a locket. And inside the locket, carefully polished and preserved, were $2 silver. Caleb's breath caught. "How did you—" "I asked the marriage broker. He still had them, kept them as some kind of joke, I think. But I paid him well to give them up." "Clara, I want you to have them." She took the locket, fastened it around his neck. "I want you to remember, every day, what you did with those $2. How you took everything you had and used it to save someone you didn't even know." Caleb touched the locket, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "You saved me too, you know. I was barely surviving before you came, going through the motions, waiting to fail. And now? Now I have everything I ever wanted, everything I didn't know I wanted." He pulled her close. "You gave me a family, a future. a reason to get up in the morning. We gave each other those things. We did. He kissed her, slow and sweet. We really did. They stood together in the quiet cabin, the fire crackling low, their children sleeping peacefully, the weight of everything they'd overcome pressing, not like a burden, but like a foundation. Solid, permanent, theirs. "Do you know what I think?" Clara whispered. "What?" "I think Lucy was right. She's been watching over us all along, guiding you to that auction, giving you the courage to bid." "You think my sister sent you to me?" "I think love doesn't end when someone dies. I think it just changes form, becomes something else." Clara touched the locket resting against his chest. "I think she's here, in this home, in our children. I think she always will be." Caleb's arms tightened around her. "I like that thought." "Me too." Outside, the Montana night stretched endless and star-filled. Inside, a family built from nothing but courage and hope and $2 settled into the peace they'd earned. And Clara Morrison, who had once been sold for less than the price of a meal, who had been called worthless by people too blind to see, finally understood what her life had been leading toward all along. Not the auction, not the humiliation, not even the love that had grown from such unlikely soil. It was this moment, this home, this family, this proof that the human heart could survive anything, as long as it refused to stop hoping. She had been the girl no one wanted. He had been the struggling cowboy with nothing to offer but $2 and a stubborn belief in something better. Together, they had become everything. And that, Clara thought as she rested her head against her husband's heart, was the only ending that ever really mattered. The ending that was also a beginning.